It is a day to honor Special Agent Michael G. Garbo, a man who selflessly gave his life to save and protect others. Good morning, everybody. Priscilla Casper will join me in just a moment, but we are here live at Calvary Church. I'm here with Lupita Murillo, who is, everybody knows, has certainly for decades covered crime here in Tucson and throughout the state, and is also gotten to know this law enforcement community here very well. Lupita, as we await here, we're going to see a procession that's going to be arriving soon. It's supposed to get underway about 8:30. But we are seeing this a lot across the country. It's happened here in Tucson. Give me some idea of what happens with the law enforcement community when something occurs.
They're a brotherhood and sisterhood. When you become a member of law enforcement, this is what it is. It's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and they all band together from all parts of the country. I've covered events like this where they have people from all over the country come in, and they may not have known that particular officer, but they know him because they share the same beliefs and because they want to protect the community. I can tell you that I knew Mike personally. Amazing individual. I've known him 16 years. I met him when he first worked in Nogales and went on a number of undercover operations with him. Always the professional, let's get the job done. He was only 51 years old when he was shot and killed on Monday. And he leaves behind his wife and a daughter. Yeah,
Lupita, I know this has been a tough week for you because, as you mentioned, you personally knew Mike Garbo. As you also can imagine, his colleagues that work closely with him. And it has certainly been a very, very difficult week. It is a great day here as far as the weather, but a very somber day here in Tucson. And that procession is now underway. We can hear the sirens. It is leaving Brings Funeral Chapel there, and they're going to be making their way here to Calvary Chapel. We are seeing now it is just arriving. It is led by a couple of motorcycle officers.
And you can see that they're from Mesa Police Department.
Yes.
So you will find that there are officers that are involved in the motorcade from all over the state of Arizona and probably the rest of the country as well. Now, I understand that the church here seats, 2,400?
2,400 capacity, yes. And they are going to, of course, have preferred seating for the family and several other law enforcement officials that will be attending this event. But also it's open to the public. And they are going to allow as many people as they can. As Lupita mentioned, it's got a capacity of 2,400. We'll talk more about that. But as you see here, the procession now just beginning to arrive as they bring the body of Mike Garbo. Lupita also said when something like this happens, you have a response that just involves law enforcement from not only here.
Edgar, these are DEA officials that are here, dignitaries. I understand we've got somebody here from Washington that is here. Also, I can tell you that hundreds of law enforcement officers are also going to be here. I understand that overseas, even people came in from overseas to pay their respects to a man that was very, very loved, admired, and respected by law enforcement and by the community. He was very involved. He loved his community. I mean, he from Nogales to Afghanistan, he was always fighting drug traffickers, always.
Yeah, they're saying that that's what he committed his life to, is combating drug traffickers anywhere he might be. He did serve as a police officer in Nashville. And Lupita, we continue to hear stories. You talk about him, and anybody that worked with him or knew him just speaks glowingly. And above all that, they talk about what an incredible professional he was and his courage that he often displayed under fire. And we'll be talking more about that as the stories emerge. But as we
some of the descriptions, actually, he was from Illinois. And one of his high school former classmates said that even in high school, he was very motivated and driven. He was a very kind and beautiful person. The DEA administrator, Ann Milligram, described him as universally loved and respected for his leadership.
Right. Now, we can see at this point the procession has not arrived here yet. They're just preparing for that. As I said before, that is leaving Brings Funeral Home. It is not too far away from here, about a 10-minute drive. But right now they're getting set to welcome that procession here. And there are law enforcement officials and other officers who have come from all over the country. As Lupita mentioned, also overseas. These people have traveled the world to be here. As we often see, we get a glimpse of this brotherhood and sisterhood as we continue to see all these different officers here.
I mentioned he was from Illinois. Actually, he was from Grayville, Illinois, and I understand that the entire community of Grayville, Illinois, is mourning his death. But when you think about it, yes, he's gone, but think of everything that he did for this community, for this country, and it's really a celebration of life.
Yes, and that celebration of life is going to take place right here at the Calvary Church. In the meantime, we've been watching this procession, and right now I'm going to send it back to the studios with Priscilla Casper. Priscilla?
Yeah, thank you, Sean and Lupita. As we said today, Agent Garbo will be remembered and the public will have a chance to honor him. Now, law enforcement met at Bring's funeral home this morning at 8. They will bring Agent Garbo's body in a procession, which we have multiple cameras along that route to Calvary Church, starting at just started now, and that funeral service begins at 10 this morning. Again, it is open to the public, followed by the honor guard and then a reception on site at noon. Now let's see if we can take a live look at that procession as it's underway. Again, they began at Bring's Chapel. We're going to head over to Nicole Constantino, who joins us live on that route. Nicole.
Priscilla, good morning. We're still seeing cars go by that are in this procession. We have if not hundreds of law enforcement officers that came out from all agencies. It would be hard to even describe the amount of them going into this procession. They're still leaving. I would imagine soon we're at the tail end of it, but just the amount of people that came out in support of Special Agent Garbo and are continuing to head down to Calvary at this moment. We're still going to be here continuing our coverage down here at the beginning of Bring's Chapel. And just a somber mood is the only way to really put it as we stood outside waiting for the procession to begin. But not only did Special Agent Garbo make impacts here across the state in Arizona, he actually made them across the country. And we're going to take a look back at his life and some of those impacts right now.
We're starting to see a whole lot more drug organizations pop up in Nashville.
Michael Garbo spent 16 years with the DEA. Prior to joining in 2005, he was a police officer in Nashville. His colleagues say he was a key player in stopping crime in Middle Tennessee.
Pretty much think Mike was probably a natural when it comes to law enforcement.
Terry Burnett, a retired Nashville officer, was with Garbo at an armed robbery on May 14th, 1998.
Long story short, my dog and I started the track, and as we went into the woods there was one suspect inside the wood line we couldn't see.
Terry says the suspect opened fire and hit him in the foot. His canine broke free, but he says Garbo didn't hesitate, going after the suspect with another officer.
Mike knew the risk going in there, knew that he had already shot one police officer, knew that he had already shot and killed a police dog.
The National Criminal Enforcement Association, a nonprofit of officers who specialize in criminal interdiction, says Garbo was a founding member. The organization posted to its Facebook page saying in part, "We are proud of his actions and hold him up in the highest regard. Garbo's motivation and dedication should serve as a constant reminder of how we all should strive to fulfill our commitments as law enforcement officers and members of the National Criminal Enforcement Association."
I can't express to you the shock that I had last night when I found out.
Retired Nashville officer Steve Antle also worked with Garbo.
He fell into the work naturally, and I know that he loved every minute of it.
Something that's proven universal since Garbo's passing. He was loved and will be missed by all.
A day that'll haunt me, and then another thing that'll haunt me is yesterday when I got the call and found out that he had been murdered.
This is a live look at Broadway in Harrison. You just saw law enforcement passing by. Let's see if looks like it ended at that location. Now, Michael Garbo is 51 years old. He honorably passed away on Monday while serving his city and nation. Former police officer for Metro Nashville PD and was a DEA special agent based in Tucson since 2005. We want to read you some of. We continue to see that procession move. Again, this is Broadway and Harrison. Now, Garbo lived a life devoted to serving and caring for others. Early in life, he graduated from Eastern Illinois University, where he would meet his wife, Vida. Soon after graduation, Michael began his career in law enforcement. We're told it's a career path inspired by his late father. Now, Michael and Vida went on to marry, and not long after came their greatest pride in life, their daughter, Alexis. And Alexis actually has created a GoFundMe page. I believe we have it up on KVOA.com. Their goal was $10,000. They have surpassed that. They have raised so far $131,000, and it continues to grow minute after minute. Now, Michael was very immersed in his work when he was not home, being a dedicated father and husband. He dedicated his life's work to combating drug traffickers, spanning from Kabul, Afghanistan, and across the United States. And some of his hobbies, we're told, practicing jiu-jitsu, martial arts, and spending time with his family and watching his daughter succeed in every aspect of her life. He is preceded in death by his mother and father, Carol and Lara Garbo, and special grandmother, Betty. And we continue to see this procession move along Broadway and Harrison. It will end up at Calvary Chapel. That's Camino Seco and Speedway. You can see multiple law enforcement, Tucson police with this procession. And Sean Mooney and Lupita are at that chapel right now. We've seen multiple law enforcement agencies there paying their respects. Again, this funeral service is open to the public. We will be live streaming it here at KVOA.com. Again, you see multiple law enforcement, Speedway and Harrison. And let's see if we can toss it back to Lupita and Sean out there. What are you guys seeing at your location at the chapel?
Well, Priscilla, obviously right now you can see behind us that they are preparing for these full honors for this heroic officer. And as you mentioned, they're en route, but they are ready to receive Mike Garbo here for this memorial. You can see a lot of people are already arriving. There's a capacity of about 2,400 people for this church. They say they will allow in as many as they possibly can. We're anticipating there'll probably be some overflow, but of course reserved seating there for the family and other dignitaries. We've seen other VIPs from the law enforcement community. The procession will, as Edgar, when we first had the shot behind us, they're expecting that procession to come in there. We see an honor guard right here behind us with the flags, and then of course you see them right by the entrance to the church.
Let me give you a little bit of background about Mike. He was a former police officer, as you've mentioned, from Nashville, Tennessee. He graduated from Eastern Illinois University, and he met his wife there. Then they got married. Then that's when he began his law enforcement career. He actually followed in his father's footsteps. So this is something that he obviously grew up with. He was born to do because he saw it firsthand from his dad.
And Lupita, you've seen so many of these individuals, men and women, who work in law enforcement. They're a different kind of human being. The sacrifices they make every day going out there and facing danger, but also the toll it takes on their family. They're heroes too.
Absolutely, absolutely. The families, I think, also. I don't think we mention them enough, but they are the ones that are supporting the people that are out on the front lines for us. You know, first
no question
responders.
About it. And so many honors are coming in. You had mentioned you saw a comment that somebody made about Mike. I imagine at this point it's probably in the thousands of the people and the lives that he touched. But we've seen honors this week Governor Doug Ducey ordering flags at half-staff throughout the state for 3 days. And then also, we're seeing other people around the country who maybe never even met Mike or just hearing the story. There's a young man, Zachariah Cartledge in Florida, who runs to honor fallen officers and canine officers, as well as raising money for their families.
Sure.
And he did a run for him.
I just got a text from one of my buds who says, "Always a sad day, and this is happening too often."
Yes, it is. 2020 was one of the worst years, I think, since 1974. Mm-hmm. So it is pretty amazing that we are seeing this so much and so often across the country. And Lupita, you've also, we just got a card from one of the DEA agents here. It's the card that they're going to be handing out to people. I have no idea if you can get to that, Edgar, but it's a picture of him. They mentioned Kabul, Afghanistan.
Right. Yeah, so he fought drug traffickers from Nogales to Afghanistan.
Yeah, and it's just, there's a quote on the back, "You got it from your father. It was all he had to give, so it's yours to use and cherish for as long as you may live." There's more on that, and they'll be passing these out to the people that have gathered here. But the procession, I believe, is near. They're starting to get set to welcome that procession here. It is an absolutely beautiful day, a somber one here in the Tucson community, and as law enforcement across the country continues to mourn the loss of Mike Garbo. And you can see right now in the distance there, on the other side of the flags, the procession arriving, led by a very large contingent of motorcycle officers. We saw before, when we saw officers from Mesa, I'm sure that those officers represent several different departments around the country.
One thing that I've always admired about these events are very, very sad, but one thing that I've always admired is that they have honor guards, and those honor guards stand watch over the fallen officer 24/7, and they also stand watch with the family. So when I say this is a tight-knit community, that this is a brotherhood, a sisterhood, that's exactly what it is, because that fallen officer and that family is never left alone.
We're just going to step back here, just allow people to see this. It is quite a sight as the procession from Mike Garbo arrives here at Calvary Church.
We should also mention that Mike leaves behind his wife and a daughter that he was.
Just want to mention that they As you can see in the distance, it's probably difficult to really make out, but you see the hearses in the back there. But what really stands out to me here is how many people are along the side there, shoulder to shoulder, to honor Mike Garbo. You're just joining us here on News 4. You're watching the arrival, the body of Mike Garbo, the memorial taking place here at Calvary Church, just off Speedway in Camino Seco. The procession arrived about 10 minutes ago, and as they continue the ceremony here, law enforcement from all over the state, the country, and even the world are here for this memorial. And we are very close to the officers who arrived by motorcycle here. One image that really caught me is all of them standing, saluting Mike Garbo. Service set to get underway about 10 o'clock. That procession coming from Brings Funeral Home, and the number of law enforcement people here, and hearing stories about what a great individual Mike Garbo was. We'll be hearing them throughout the day we have all week since his loss. We expect to see his coffin taken to the church shortly. We'll step back here so that you can just take in the scene here.
A live look now. You can see multiple law enforcement vehicles, and also the public can attend this funeral service at Calvary Chapel. It begins at 10 this morning. Again, we saw a long line of cars, and as you just watched moments ago, I mean, there are hundreds of law enforcement officers here. You see Tucson Fire Department also taking part in this to honor Garbo's life. That flag right there, courtesy of the Tucson Fire Department. We see Border Patrol, and look there, many people who didn't even know Special Agent Garbo coming out to honor a law enforcement officer who was killed in the line of duty. They have flags there. We saw that along the procession route, multiple people coming up to pay their respects along this procession route. Again, many law enforcement from all over, as you heard from Sean Moody, from all over the country, paying their respects to Garbo. I don't know if we have Lupita, because if she can hear me, she actually got to work with him and she knew him personally. And if Lupita, if you can hear me, can you talk about the person he was?
Yeah, Priscilla, Lupita's here with me as we watch people file him here to the church. It is going to hold about 2,400 people. They say they're going to allow as many in as they can, and because it is open to the public. But Priscilla was asking a little bit about your relationship with Mike. I know when you heard the news, it hit you really hard because you knew him and his family. Could you tell us a little bit more about Mike and that relationship that you had?
Well, I met Mike 16 years ago when he was working in Nogales. We did a number of undercover operations stories together. In fact, I was telling one of the DEA agents that I don't know if you want to catch my tennis shoes here? These tennis shoes have also met Mike and have been in a lot of events with him. You know, he very, very professional. I mean, the man was just an incredible individual who just loved what he did. I mean, he was really born to do this, and he was never. I never ever heard him say anything bad about anybody. And you know, one of those people that just was very positive. Just go get him. And apparently, he's been this way all his life.
Yeah, might have had a few bad things to say about some of the bad guys. That,
absolutely, absolutely, and he took down quite a few.
And Lupita, it's really incredible to hear, though, what an awesome person he was when he wasn't behind that badge every day with his family and friends. But also we're hearing tales of its heroism, which is just incredible. One out of Nashville, because we've talked about how he was a police officer in Nashville with the Metro Police there, and there's a story that came out of one of his colleagues who served with him, who was chasing a suspect down. That individual shot his canine dead and injured that officer, and then had taken off into some woods, and Mike had come to his aid and then went right after this suspect, and they got him. And that is just one of the stories that we're hearing about him, and that he's legendary as far as how he worked, because he was a group supervisor. Obviously, he commanded a number of men, and it is very clear they respected him a lot.
I spoke to a former supervisor of his when I heard the news, and of course we heard that it was Mike. I immediately called him, and he said to me, Mike was the type of employee, was the type of agent that you wanted on your team, because he got the job done. And whatever it took, he did it to get it done and to keep this community safe. Yeah. And the former supervisor said, that's the kind of person that you want, and that's exactly what he was. Yeah,
and these officers, every one of them we see here, go out that door every day, and we talked a little bit about the families, Lupita. I imagine when someone gets into a relationship with somebody who's in law enforcement, they know what they're in for, but still, every day when they walk out that door, and you don't know if they're coming back through it.
Exactly. You never do. This was what happened on Monday was just a routine operation, and it ended anything but routine.
Yeah, and when we welcomed everybody in this morning, I mentioned how he selflessly gave his life to protect and save others, and that's exactly what he did on this train. There were 137 passengers on board, 11 crew members, and there were no injuries to any of those people. And we also should mention the two other officers that were injured as well.
Yes.
A TPD officer who worked closely with the DEA, and another DEA agent who is still in the hospital. So these officers every day, what they do is just amazing.
Mike was assigned to the Counter Narcotics Alliance, and it's a multi-agency drug task force. That's who he was assigned to. And in fact, I'm wearing a CNA pin today to honor Mike and the CNA people, because this has been just a terrible blow to the people he worked with and to this entire community. One of his high school former classmates, I think, described him best: a very kind and beautiful person.
Yeah.
That was Mike.
Yeah. And we see a lot of more people arriving here. Lupita, I think we are going to have a lot of people who are not going to be able to get in here, and yet they're here. Just their presence, that they took time out of their day to come and honor this officer. And this is also going on around the country. I mentioned the young man in Florida who's running to raise money for not only Mike Garbo's family, but also other officers and even canine officers, as well as the families. We mentioned earlier also that there's a GoFundMe for the Garbo family. And if you would like to help out, they say in lieu of flowers, this is certainly going to be a very, very difficult time for the family. And if you would like to help, please track that fund down. I'm sure we have it up on our website, and a link to where you can make a donation to the family.
We talked about 2,400 seat capacity at this church, but I think this is going to exceed the capacity. Yeah. There's hundreds and hundreds of law enforcement officers, and we also mentioned they even came from overseas.
Now, following this service, there's also going to be some events outside here, Lupita, so we will bring that to you as it happens, but it really is a gorgeous day to honor this man.
And to remember his life and the legacy that he left behind. Yeah. You know, he was just a very professional and great to work with and great to know. And I'm honored that I actually was one of the people that actually worked with him and knew him and thought the world of him. It's very sad. very sad.
Now, Lupita, you've worked with so many law enforcement officers, and I said before, they're a different kind of person.
In a good way.
Yes, of course. But what do you say? I mean, you've been around a lot of them. What is it that separates them, that makes them different than other people that, as Chief Magnus said, they run towards the bullets. They don't run away from them.
I think it takes a very unique individual to be a first responder, because firefighters are in the same category. And it takes a unique person and a lot of, I think, a lot of perseverance and strength, because we all want to make a difference in our community. We all do in our own way. But these officers, these first responders, actually put their life on the line every single day when they leave.
Yeah, this was a routine sweep.
Exactly.
What they do, the train had come into Tucson after 7 on Monday morning, and this is not something that was unusual. They weren't particularly targeting these individuals, and as you said, you never know. When it's going to be a really bad situation.
I remember one time we were on a case with Mike, and we were checking out all the shuttles on Tucson South Side, because they were bringing in a lot of drugs and cash. And so this was a routine thing. We went out with him, and he said to me, he says, "Lupita, I promise you, we're going to get some drugs, we're going to get some cash." Sure enough, because this is how well they knew what they were doing, and that's exactly what we ended up with. Producer Paul Birmingham and I went on this assignment with him, and we always did our best not to show him, because he was undercover. Yeah, so we blurred him out, but he was just an amazing individual. And I keep going back to this, as his former classmate said, he was a very kind and beautiful person.
You can hear the motorcycles here. They're very close to our position as they begin to line up once again, and I'm just amazed. It isn't just Tucson police folks. We are seeing
we're seeing
Tucson police officers,
Mesa, Chandler, DPS.
Yes, DPS.
Absolutely. It is it's hard to describe. It's sad, but yet it's uplifting, that all these people came out to honor Mike.
Well, I'm sure it also gives these officers comfort to know that every one of these individuals here in uniform is there for them and will be there for them, and I'm sure that they will be there for Mike's family as well. And I imagine when you go out every day to this job, that is some comfort to know that you do have this brotherhood and sisterhood that is there for you every second. Whenever there's an injury, Lupita, you've been to the hospitals more than you could probably count at this point. I don't know if you're still amazed by how many other officers show up, and that doesn't mean just guys from the department.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. When you take your oath, it's an oath that you take and you keep with you, to protect the community.
Yeah. Well, this certainly isn't something that's done on paper for what they do. They're there because they love each other. They're there. No matter
they have
what
each other's
happens.
backs. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And this is this is just a very sad day.
You see the hearse here behind us. A lot of the officers are now heading into the church. A really, as you could see in the distance, a very long line
of people waiting to get in.
Into
Absolutely.
This church. And we will certainly be here. We'll tell you more as it happens. But right now, I'm going to send it back to Priscilla in the studio. Priscilla.
Thank you, Sean and Lupita, as they talk about just how many people are showing up. Looks like hundreds and hundreds. We want to head over to the entrance of the Calvary Chapel parking lot where Nicole Constantino is, where Tucson Fire Department has their flag, and there's also people lined up outside with flags as well. Nicole, what are you seeing over there?
Priscilla, we have seen a huge amount of support, of civilian support coming out. We have flags with a thin blue line on it. We have people out waving flags and also having signs in support. On the other side of the road, while the procession was going in, we had cars pulling over to pay their respects for Special Agent Garbo. We have the fire department flag up, and people are still coming in from that procession line, and we are continuing to see an outpour of civilians on the sidewalk coming up, showing their respects, wanting to take a moment to recognize the sacrifices Special Agent Garbo has made by giving his life to the safety of not only those law enforcement agencies, but also for the public, and racing towards the danger. You know, if you've been listening for any amount of time, Special Agent Garbo always ran towards the danger in many situations that he was faced, both here in Arizona and also in Nashville, where he was a police officer, and that continued all the way until the end, when it really is just a testament to his bravery and dedication to his work. And we can see that the people of Southern Arizona and all the people across the state and even the country that are coming in recognize that and are showing their respects this morning. I'm trying to see the line of people that are still trying to get into the procession, or getting into the chapel from that procession line. I think we may have finally gotten to the end of it, as we are looking towards just some regular civilian cars. We don't see any going back in. So for that, I'm going to toss it back to you as we get this procession final underway.
All right, thank you, Nicole. And we're just getting this into our newsroom that Attorney General Garland actually yesterday was in Tucson, and he met privately with Garbo's family, as well as the other DEA agent injured and the Tucson police officer injured in Monday's shooting. You know, I've been going over the GoFundMe page that Garbo's daughter set up. So far, over $131,000 raised, and some of these comments are past colleagues of his. Someone saying, you know, rest easy, brother, from the Young family, a retired DEA agent that worked with him in Charlotte. Another one, on behalf of my family and the Fraternal Order of Border Agents, condolences to the entire family. May God grant you peace, strength, and comfort as you grieve this tragic loss. Another one from retired Sergeant Brian Petty and Marlene Petty. They were co-workers with Mike in the 90s, and they said on behalf of the MNPD West Walking Patrol. And another from a classmate, BA 167, saying, sending all our prayers, love, and support during this heartbreaking time. You know, we're hearing from many of his colleagues, many of his friends. News 4 Tucson's Eric Fink spoke with one of his friends, Steve Antle. He told Eric, quote, I can't ever remember him panicked in any way on the radio or in person. No matter what happened, he was always cool, calm, and collected. And we continue to hear this from all the friends that Garbo was born to be in law enforcement. And take a look right there. You can see this little boy and, you know, maybe his mother or family member, friend, holding up a flag honoring Garbo's life. This funeral service set to start a little less than an hour at 10 this morning. And what we've just seen all morning long, starting from the procession at 8:30, hundreds of law enforcement following, and what you see right in front of Calvary Church, many people paying their respects, holding up flags. Again, this could cause some traffic if you are in the area, but the public is free to attend this service. Again, Tucson Fire Department coming out to support and honor Garbo's life, holding up that flag there. We've seen Border Patrol agents, Tucson police, and as Sean said earlier, really law enforcement from the entire country. I mean, these are the family. And every time we see, you know, a law enforcement officer killed in the line of duty, you know, really affects the entire country. Now, again, we see people outside lining up. I'm sure we're going to be seeing this throughout the morning, again, as people go into Calvary Chapel and get ready for this memorial service. Again, when we talk about Garbo, 51 years old. He has a daughter, a wife. He's been in law enforcement for over a decade, and he's done incredible work. You heard with Lupita talking about, how they went on a story, and he was like, we're going to find drugs, we're going to find cash, illegal drugs and cash, and of course they found it, and they're getting bad guys off the street. I mean, he just did incredible work serving his country. If Lupita and Sean can hear me, Lupita, you knew him personally, you knew the family. Have you been able to talk to them this morning at all? And if not, you tell us about who he was for people who have who don't know.
Well, Priscilla, Lupita stepped out here, but I have been talking to her all morning, and of course been hearing the stories about Mike Garbo. Every one of them talks about not just what a hero he was, the courage that he possessed, but that he was just an incredible person when he wasn't on the job with his family and his friends. And you're seeing that, the evidence of it right here as all these people arrive to honor him. I'm sure many may have never met him, but those who did know him have just spoken glowingly of him. I mentioned the story of when he was in Nashville, coming to the aid of an officer who had been injured and whose canine had been killed by a suspect, and he chased that suspect down when it was imminent danger, heading into woods, I believe it was, where this was an armed suspect, and he went in and got the guy. That is just one example of the many stories. Now, he was a group supervisor with the Drug Enforcement Administration. To earn that role, obviously, he had to have not only just a great deal of experience, also a lot of respect among the agents that he served with. And we see the slow procession of people going in there. It's as far as the eye can see from where we are, of people lined up to try and get into the church. There's only 2,400 seats in there, and I am certain they're going to reach that soon. I spoke with one of the DEA agents here who's helping the media out, and she said that they will fit as many people in that building as they're allowed to do. I imagine a lot of people will just stay here, and just their mere presence is just an example of the people coming out here. I see that there's two people behind me with flags, the blue flags that we have seen supporting thin blue line, as they call it, the police officers, and they've been standing there since we got here this morning. I don't know if Edgar can see it. Edgar, the two individuals back here, they've been here since we arrived this morning, and Lupita and I are just standing there. Just to show their support. I'm sure that means a lot to the family that, as they've been coming in, just to see these people, as Nicole mentioned, that people are just coming in, probably knowing they're not going to get into the church, but they wanted to just
I just took a little walk here, and you cannot imagine the line. I would say it's the length of a football field. That's the line of people wanting to get in. And again, it's 2,400 capacity. That's max.
Now, Priscilla had mentioned when we came back in here about your relationship with Mike and his family. Could you tell us a little bit about his family, what you know, and your experience with them?
I know that he went to Eastern Illinois College in Illinois, and that's where he met his wife, and he began his law enforcement career after he got married. Yeah. They have a daughter.
Alexis.
They have a daughter, and I understand she's a student.
Yeah.
And that was his life. He was a great father and a great husband, and a great individual to work with. And so he just, and then I also mentioned earlier, and if you just are tuning in right now, his father was in law enforcement. Yeah. So when a lot of people say he was born to do this job, basically they were right, because
Absolutely.
His dad was law enforcement, so he followed in his father's footsteps.
Yeah, and we've experienced these events before. It is so difficult.
It's always so difficult, absolutely. But I I'm comforted, and I can't even imagine how these families feel, but I'm comforted in knowing that, look at all the support that they have.
Yeah. And it isn't support that lasts a day.
No,
the support will go on, and when something like this happens, the families all come out and show their support because they know it could have been them.
Exactly.
They could be the ones that are in the front of this church, and they really come out. And as I said before, when we go to a hospital, I'm always really touched by how many police officers and other people show up to the hospital just to be there, to support the family, and also the injured officer. We have one of the officers still was involved in this incident.
Another DEA agent, absolutely.
Still in the hospital.
And of course, we continue to pray for him and his family.
No, absolutely.
And we will continue to pray. There was a Tucson police officer who was injured. We understand he was released.
Yeah. Yes, the TPD officer who was injured in the shooting and has now been released. But these people that have to live through this every day, and have you had an opportunity? Have you spoken to the family?
No, I have not. No. I have not spoken to the family. No.
But I think you saw Mike recently.
I spoke to him recently. Yes, I did. I spoke to him recently. I was working on a story and needed his input on it, and he was, helping me all he could. That's another thing about him. If he didn't know what was going on, he would help you find the person that did and put you in touch with them. It just wasn't like, oh, I don't know. He always went that extra mile to answer any questions that I had.
Yeah. And could you see, when we talk about it, but the respect when he was around other officers, how they acted around him?
He was, I used to call him like a gentle giant, just he was just very, in my opinion, very low-key, just kind of sat back, observed, but quick-witted and just ready to go, and so professional, and let's just get the job done.
And a sense of humor to go with it. You have to have it in this profession.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that went a long way.
I'm sure. Yes, it did. I mean, a couple of, stories that I was on with him, assignments, and it's one of those things when you're on assignment like this that you may get something, you may not.
Right. And more often not.
Yeah. But I was very lucky with Mike that whenever I was on one of his teams, that we were out doing a ride-along, we were always lucky.
Yeah. That line is starting to get a little shorter. That means a lot more people have been able to make their way into the church. It is set to begin at 10 a.m.
People were here at 8 o'clock this morning.
They were lined up. A lot of cars in the parking lot, and others who have just come here to be here.
Oh, you're right. That line is getting shorter, so we will see if everybody gets in. That means 2,400 capacity have filled the church.
Yeah, and I believe you're going to go inside. You're going to try.
I'm going to exactly.
I kept her over here this whole time.
There may not be any room for me.
But I know they are streaming the service.
Yes,
so
they are.
People will have the opportunity to hear from so many people that knew and loved Mike, and we will be able to see that, of course, on KVOA.com, and we will
our Facebook,
tell you what's going on here.
I'm amazed by the people that are behind us.
Yeah. They've been standing there with their flags.
That's all. Yeah.
Since before we got here.
Since before we got here, you're right.
From sunrise. And with that, I'm going to send it back to Priscilla right now. We will be out here throughout the morning letting you know exactly what's happening. There's going to be more events taking place, an honor guard and other things happening once the service wraps up. Right now, though, Priscilla, back to you in the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Lupita, especially Lupita, for sharing those personal, intimate stories that you knew Garbo and what your relationship. Now, a law enforcement brother and his colleagues at the DEA are remembering Special Agent Mike Garbo. Garbo spent 16 years with the DEA in Arizona, working his way up to group supervisor. As Steve Antle tells us, Special Agent Garbo had an unmatched work ethic and professionalism. He says his friend was born to do this job.
Mike Garbo worked for the DEA for 16 years. The DEA says this special agent, who helped lead the Phoenix Field Division, traveled the world to bring drug traffickers to justice from Nogales to Kabul, Afghanistan. Steve Antle worked with Garbo when the two were police officers on the force in Nashville starting in the 1990s.
I can't express to you the shock that I had last night when I found out.
Antle says from the moment they started working together, you could tell Garbo was born to be in law enforcement.
He fell into the work naturally, and I know that he loved every minute of it.
And his colleagues loved him. In a statement Tuesday, the DEA said, quote, across DEA, Group Supervisor Garbo was universally loved and respected for his leadership and for his unrelenting passion to protect the safety of the American people. Above all else, he was a devoted and loving father and husband. DEA mourns the loss of our beloved colleague. Antle remembers how cool his friend was under pressure.
I can't ever remember him in any way panicked on the radio or in person. No matter what happened, he was always just calm, cool, and collected.
And that was Eric Fink reporting. Antle says he's not at all surprised Garbo ran into the danger. He says Mike loved being in the thick of it. Now, Garbo was 51 years old. For those of you just tuning in, we are remembering his life and legacy after he passed away on Monday while serving his city and nation. Former police officer for Metro Nashville PD, and he was a DEA special agent based in Tucson, Arizona since 2005. We're told he lived a life devoted to serving and caring for others. We've definitely heard this all morning long as we have spoken to friends of who he was. And, you know, we always come around to the same statement that he was born to be in law enforcement. Now, early in life, he graduated from Eastern Illinois University, where he met his wife, Vida. Now, soon after graduation, he began his career in law enforcement. And we're told it was a career path inspired by his late father. Michael and Vida went on to marry, and not long after came their daughter, Alexis. And Mike, we're told, was well immersed in his work. And when he was not home, he was a dedicated father and husband. He dedicated his life's work to combating drug traffickers spanning from Kabul, Afghanistan, and across the United States with unmatched talent, knowledge, dignity, and bravery. Some of his hobbies, we're told, were practicing jiu-jitsu, martial arts. He loved to spend time with his family and watching his daughter succeed in every aspect of her life. And he is preceded in death by his mother and father, Carol and Laro Garbo, and special grandmother, Betty Garbo. Again, for those of you just tuning in, we're taking a live look. This is at Calvary Chapel. Right outside, you can see looks like all of the cars have made it into the parking lot. And just about 10 minutes ago, there was a long line. So we see all the cars are in the parking lot. Tucson Fire Department there holding up their flag. We spoke with DEA. They sent us a statement about Garbo. They say the DEA is deeply saddened to report that the DEA Group Supervisor Mike Garbo died as a result of injuries sustained during the shooting. They say he was a mentor, he was a leader, and he was legendary in the Tucson community. He had talent and courage, and he carried out duties ranging from tactical instruction to serving as a member of the Phoenix Field Division's Special Response Team. They say the DEA says he was universally loved and respected for his leadership and passion to protect the safety of the American people. And above all else, they say he was a devoted and loving father and husband, and the DEA mourns the loss of their beloved colleague, and they thank him for all of his service he did to keep the American people safe. His daughter, Alexis, created a GoFundMe page already. $133,473 raised. And I want to read you because, when you can, contribute and donate to a GoFundMe page, you're able to write comments. And I'm blown away by reading some of these comments. They're from, colleagues way back in the day. We have from classmate BA167 saying, sending our prayers, love, and support during this heartbreaking time. We have another message from retired Sergeant Brian Petty and Marlene Petty. They were co-workers with Mike in the 90s. They said on behalf of the MNPD West Walking Patrol. I mean, Garbo had such an incredible career. He worked for the DEA for 16 years. We heard from Lupita talking about, all the stories they went on and all the success they had, capturing illegal drugs, illegal money. Now we see a ton of law enforcement all throughout the morning there. It looks like that line getting into the chapel has died down. I think Sean Lupita saying about 2,400 people can fit in there. Again, this service set to start at 10 in the morning, and the public is invited to join in on remembering Garbo's life. We can see a ton of law enforcement out there chatting as well as walking in. Everything from Border Patrol agents, DEA, Tucson Police, the Tucson Fire Department. This is their brother. And law enforcement is a family, and to see hundreds of people coming out, even the public coming out. We've seen so many people lining the streets for that procession route on the east side this morning, holding up flags, honoring, Garbo, who killed in the line of duty. So it's incredible to see all of these people coming out, even people that didn't even know him. But we've spoken to a lot of his family. We've read the comments online of former colleagues, and they all come down to say that Garbo was born to be in law enforcement. He had a very successful career. He's a father, he's a husband, he loved his family. Let's see if we have Sean and Lupita back. Looks like things are starting to die down outside as they can fit 2,400 people inside. We know a number of speakers will be, honoring his life during this ceremony this morning, and we will bring you that live here on the air. But Sean, what are you seeing out there?
Well, right now you can see pretty much most of the people that are going to get into the church are inside now, but we see a lone horse that they have brought over. And I'm sure there's a lot of symbolism behind that with the law enforcement community. But a very somber scene out here, Priscilla. It's a very sad day. It is a beautiful day, but it is also a very somber one here in the city of Tucson, as law enforcement, not only here but around the state and around the world, really, is mourning the loss of an incredible special agent.
I understand that DEA Administrator Ann Milligram is expected to arrive momentarily. Mm-hmm. She described him as universally loved and respected for his leadership.
Yeah, and she's just among the many high-ranking officials from the Department of Enforcement and Drug Enforcement Administration.
Right, those horse beats.
Yeah. And we can't get a real close look, but of that horse, but it's the riderless horse, and you can see the boots on the saddle there, representing the lone individual, the law enforcement, as this service is set to get underway about 10 a.m. One of the agents brought over the card. I showed it earlier, but I wanted to read what they have on the back of it. And it says, "You got it from your father. It was all he had to give. So it's yours to use and cherish for as long as you may live. If you lose the watch he gave you, it can always be replaced. But a black mark on your name, son, can never be erased. It was clean the day you took it, and a worthy name to bear. When he got it from his father, there was no dishonor there. So make sure you guard it wisely. After all is said and done, you'll be glad the name is spotless when you give it to your son." And P.T., you mentioned that he followed in his father's footsteps.
He followed in his father's footsteps.
It's hard not to get emotional when you read something
Absolutely.
like that, knowing that. But
when we were handed that, and I had just mentioned to you that his father was in law enforcement, and when we received that, I looked it over and I just thought, oh my gosh, is this, how appropriate is this for this time?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what people's faith is out there, but we can pray that they're reunited. Mike and his father.
I believe that, and his mother. His mother.
And incredibly proud of him for the life that he lived here. But he is leaving many behind that are going to mourn his loss for a long, long time to come.
His loss is being felt by everybody.
Yeah. And in the distance, you hear the bagpipes. Which we hear at many law enforcement funerals, unfortunately.
And every time I hear bagpipes, I always think of law enforcement funerals.
Really?
Always. And it's not always when you hear them, but when I do, that's what I think of.
See an officer leading that horse. And we are seeing that more people have come up. They've got a line of cones set up here so that other people don't really encroach this area where they've set up for the people who are attending the service to get in. But they're lining up there, and they're just standing there. We mentioned the two people with the flag. They're still here. We've seen someone else has shown up, and further in the distance we see other people. But it is really amazing to be here and see how many people have gathered here to honor the life of one very heroic officer who gave his life protecting others. 137 passengers were on board that train, 11 crew members. Every single one of them got off that train safely.
Yes. When you think of what could have happened.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe it's better not to think of what could have happened, but it didn't.
I know. And we hear some of the stories that people were worried about their belongings. I know that many of them got them back, but that wasn't what was important that day.
No.
And the people getting off that train safely through the selfless acts of not just Mike Garbo, but the other two officers who were injured, and the many others who were there.
Police officer, absolutely.
We saw the video. There was a lot of surveillance video of that area, and you saw passengers going this way to safety, and you saw officers rushing to where we heard the gunfire.
I was talking to one of the officers who was one of the first officers to arrive, and he's been on for 30 years, and he said he had never seen anything like it. He said it was horrific,
yeah.
and he's been on 30 years. He said he compared that to the nurses shooting at the U of A.
Wow. Yeah, and as we talked about earlier, these situations, and you've been out with not just after scenes, you've been there when these guys have gone in. You know how things can go sideways in a hurry.
Yeah.
When you think that it's just a routine situation, that's why these very skilled officers are prepared for everything they possibly can be.
Early on in my career here at Channel 4, we would go right behind the SWAT team. We'd be I have a photographer, and we'd put on our little a flat vest, and we would just go right behind them.
Yeah, Edgar, I don't know if you can get a
anymore.
shot here. They brought the horse over, the riderless horse. You see the boots and the stirrups backwards on there. another way that they honor.
And this horse is from the was brought here by U.S. Border Patrol.
And it represents the officer looking back on his family and his loved ones that he leaves behind. An incredible symbol there. And 2020, one of the worst years for losses of law enforcement officers. Many lost to COVID-19, but also many lost in very violent situations, Lupita. And 2021 is not
it's not getting now.
Well, for officers.
They lost their lives very much like Mike lost his, protecting the community, keeping drugs off the streets.
Yeah, that continues to be a problem. And I grew up here. It used to be Tucson was this friendly little town, this little community. It is going to be sometimes very dangerous.
As the population grows, so does the crime.
Yeah. But it's nice to know that we do have these officers who will step in line to save your life anytime they're called. I see a lot of the officers here gathering. I imagine with pizza that they're sharing stories of Mike.
Oh, of course they are.
And what he meant to them.
Yes. And as I mentioned earlier...
See the honor guard now coming up. In the distance there. And departments represented from all over the state, of course. We said about the right here in front of us with all of the motorcycles.
Yes, we can just name them off. Mesa Police, Chandler, of course, Tucson Police, Department of Public Safety, Pima County Sheriff's Department. I saw them coming in as well.
And we spoke with one of the DEA agents, and she mentioned the administrator coming here with the DEA, but also many, many others. Merrick Garland was here yesterday, the Attorney General. He visited the hospital here and the injured agent. So it is very clear that this has become not only a national story, but a worldwide story as they honor Mike Garbo, who represents all these individuals and what they do every single day and the sacrifice that they make.
You were mentioning all over the world. You're right. Agents from overseas are also here today to honor Mike. And this area here that we're in is going to be the area where they're going to do the 21-gun salute and taps.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that once the service is over, it's set to start about 10 a.m. They will have more events going on. As you mentioned, the 21-gun salute, and that will happen. We're not exactly sure, but somewhere in this area, and we'll be able to bring that to you. And folks, you can also catch the stream of the service right here on News 4 Tucson. Also, you can catch it on our Facebook page if you're not able to get to a television, or also online at KVOA.com.
And the services should be starting, well, at 10 o'clock, so we've got a little bit of time here before the services start. And there, as you mentioned, we can watch it on KVOA.com or on Facebook.
And of course, we will be bringing more coverage throughout the day for those who did not have the opportunity to catch this live this morning. If you talk to anyone, then you can tell them that they can see everything that happened, of course, on our newscast coming up at noon, and then, of course, this afternoon and this evening. But I'm so touched by some of these people that you see in the background who've just come here.
Exactly. Well, because I think they believe in law enforcement, and this is why they're here. They're here to support law enforcement, and especially, Mike, Agent Mike. I've talked to a couple of people, and they didn't know him, but they honor the fact that he died in the line of duty to protect this community, and that's why they're here.
Absolutely. And of course, I think what means the most right now with these people is when family members are going into the church, arriving here, and they see this support, because a lot of times our officers don't get that. The people don't normally go up and say, "Hey, thanks for what you do." But this is really very clear that these people care about the family, and as we've said before, they have a GoFundMe. It's going to be a very difficult time for this family. If you can give, please do. In the meantime, just support them. And right now, I'm going to send it back over to Priscilla. We'll be out here throughout the morning, but you can catch the service, as I mentioned, on our Facebook page, also at KVOA.com, and we will certainly stay here on KVOA.com as they stream the service that's coming up. Priscilla, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Lupita. Incredible to see how many law enforcement officers, again, what Sean and Lupita were saying, everything from Mesa, Border Patrol, Tucson Police. Now, the outpouring of thoughts and condolences shows Special Agent Garbo was well loved here in Arizona, and we're looking back on his life and how he left impacts all across the country.
We're starting to see a whole lot more drug organizations pop up in Nashville.
Michael Garbo spent 16 years with the DEA. Prior to joining in 2005, he was a police officer in Nashville. His colleagues say he was a key player in stopping crime in Middle Tennessee.
Pretty much think Mike was probably a natural when it comes to law enforcement.
Terry Burnett, a retired Nashville officer, was with Garbo at an armed robbery on May 14th, 1998.
Long story short, my dog and I started the track, and as we went into the woods there was one suspect inside the wood line we couldn't see.
Terry says the suspect opened fire and hit him in the foot. His canine broke free, but he says Garbo didn't hesitate, going after the suspect with another officer.
Mike knew the risk going in there, knew that he had already shot one police officer, knew that he had already shot and killed a police dog.
The National Criminal Enforcement Association, a nonprofit of officers who specialize in criminal interdiction, says Garbo was a founding member. The organization posted to its Facebook page saying in part, "We are proud of his actions and hold him up in the highest regard. Garbo's motivation and dedication should serve as a constant reminder of how we all should strive to fulfill our commitments as law enforcement officers and members of the National Criminal Enforcement Association."
I can't express to you the shock that I had last night when I found out.
Retired Nashville officer Steve Antle also worked with Garbo.
He fell into the work naturally, and I know that he loved every minute of it.
Something that's proven universal since Garbo's passing. He was loved and will be missed by all.
A day that'll haunt me, and then another thing that'll haunt me is yesterday when I got the call and found out that he had been murdered.
Now, Agent Garbo's decision to chase that suspect in Tennessee received national recognition from former President Bill Clinton. Well, as we take a live look at Calvary Chapel, law enforcement continues to enter as that funeral service set to begin at 10 this morning. Now, for those of you just tuning in, we are remembering the life of Michael Garbo, 51 years old, honorably passing away on Monday while serving his city and nation. He was a former police officer for Metro Nashville PD, and then he was a DEA special agent based in Tucson since 2005. Now, he lived a life devoted to serving and caring for others. Early in life, he graduated from Eastern Illinois University, where he would meet his wife, Vida. And then soon after graduation, he began a career in law enforcement. And we're told that career path was inspired by his late father. Now, Michael and Vida went on to marry, and then they had a daughter, Alexis. Now, Mike, we're told, was well immersed in his work when he was not home, and he was a dedicated father and husband. He dedicated his life's work to combating drug traffickers spanning from Kabul, Afghanistan, and all across the United States. I know we heard from Lupita, going on stories and ride-alongs, and when you typically go on a ride-along with law enforcement, you never know what is going to happen. And one of the stories she shared this morning was that on one of their stories, they were looking for illegal drugs, illegal money. And she went on this ride along with Garbo, and he was like, "We're going to find it. And Lupita said, sure enough, they found it. They always had a very successful mission in taking bad guys, drugs, illegal money off the streets. You know, one of his hobbies, so practicing jiu-jitsu, martial arts. He loved to spend time with his family and watching his daughter succeed in every aspect of her life. He's a beloved husband, father. His daughter Alexis created a GoFundMe page already. It's nearing $136,000. It's every time I refresh the page, it's growing by the minute. And you're able to make a comment on a GoFundMe page when you make a donation, and there's hundreds of comments, and a lot of them are from Garbo's former colleagues. One of them says, I'm a retired San Jose PD, but now live in the Tucson area. Thank you to all DEA and police officers for the difficult job you continue to perform on a daily basis. My sincere condolences to the family. Another one, on behalf of the GHS class of 1990, rest peacefully, Mike. We have another one, a DEA agent that is retired. He says, rest in peace. You are a true hero. Praying for the Garbo family. You know, in that package by Nicole, we heard from Steve Antle, who worked with Garbo in Nashville at the Metro Police Department. They go back to the 90s. And he said the moment they started working together, he could tell Garbo was born to be in law enforcement. He said, quote, to one of our reporters, I can't ever remember him panicked in any way on the radio or in person. He also said no matter what happened, he was always cool, calm, and collected. And we've, you know, for those of you just tuning in, we are remembering Michael Garbo, the DEA agent killed in the line of duty on Monday at the Amtrak station in downtown. We continue to hear from friends, colleagues. We've seen hundreds of law enforcement walk into Calvary Church. We see there Tucson Police Department, Mesa Police, Border Patrol, Tucson Fire. You saw the riderless horse earlier when Sean was talking about it. You see the boots on the saddle, and the boots are behind, and this is one of the highest military symbols that stands among the highest honors for a fallen officer, and it's that fallen hero looking back at his troops for the last time. A very powerful symbol there. Again, this ceremony is set to start at 10 this morning, so a little less than 10 minutes. We know there are a ton of speakers that will be talking about and remembering Garbo's life and career, and I'm sure sharing very personal stories of how they knew him and how he touched so many. He was a group supervisor, so he really was in charge of many people. We've heard many stories of a lot of his colleagues looking up to him. He was a great leader and mentor. A little bit into our newsroom a little bit ago, we heard that Attorney General Merrick Garland actually got to meet with Garbo's family yesterday, as well as the other DEA agent still in the hospital and a Tucson police officer that were injured in that shooting on Monday. Now, after this ceremony, there will be the 21 salute, the honor guard, as well as a reception starting around noon. For this ceremony, though, we will bring you that live stream on KVOA as well as our social media platforms. Again, for those of you just tuning in, we are remembering DEA agent Michael Garbo. He had an incredible career, as you've heard all morning. He wanted to be in law enforcement because of his father. He looked up to him. And we're going to be hearing, I'm sure, throughout the morning how all of his colleagues looked up to him as a leader and mentor. We want to send it over to Nicole Constantino, who joins us live from outside of the church with more. Nicole, what are you seeing from where you are?
We have started to see things calm down now as the procession is starting to get underway. We had, I want to say, hundreds of people just in that line of cars from the procession from Brings Chapel to here. We have seen those people who came out in support with the flags go inside or go wait with the public, where the public is landing outside, where you can, when the chapel obviously has filled up. But we saw a ton of support coming out. We had cars pulling over on the side of the road, honking as they went by. We had people out here in their uniforms saluting the procession as it came by. And I'm from a law enforcement family myself, and you always fear something like this happening to one of your own. But also when you're in that, the family and brother and sisterhood from all across different agencies really just tugs at your heartstrings. And seeing this here and seeing the procession, people gathering at Brings, coming in, coming over throughout the early morning, it sort of gave you goosebumps just to see. And also the people coming out to pay their respects, just the civilians holding out that thin blue line flag, waving their hands, waving. They had signs that they made, all of that. It was touching. And so the fire department has now taken down that flag at the entrance here, and we are starting to see a situation die down as more people have arrived, and we are waiting for that ceremony to get underway in just a few minutes. But I'm going to send it back to you right now in the studio.
All right, thank you, Nicole. A law enforcement brother and his colleagues at the DEA are remembering Special Agent Mike Garbo. Garbo spent 16 years with the DEA here in Arizona, working his way up to group supervisor. Steve Antle, a friend, tells us Special Agent Garbo had an unmatched work ethic and professionalism. He says his friend was born to do this job.
Mike Garbo worked for the DEA for 16 years. The DEA says this special agent, who helped lead the Phoenix Field Division, traveled the world to bring drug traffickers to justice, from Nogales to Kabul, Afghanistan. Steve Antle worked with Garbo when the two were police officers on the force in Nashville, starting in the 1990s.
I can't express to you the shock that I had last night when I found out.
Antle says from the moment they started working together, you could tell Garbo was born to be in law enforcement.
He fell into the work naturally, and I know that he loved every minute of it.
And his colleagues loved him. In a statement Tuesday, the DEA said, quote, across DEA, Group Supervisor Garbo was universally loved and respected for his leadership and for his unrelenting passion to protect the safety of the American people. Above all else, he was a devoted and loving father and husband. DEA mourns the loss of our beloved colleague. Antle remembers how cool his friend was under pressure.
I can't ever remember him in any way panicked on the radio or in person. No matter what happened, he was always just calm, cool, and collected.
And that was Eric Fink reporting. Calm, cool, and collected, and born to do this job. Now, Antle says he's not at all surprised that Garbo ran into the danger. He says Mike loved being in the thick of it. He was 51 years old. We want to head back out to Sean Mooney right outside the chapel. And Sean, what are you seeing now as that service is about to begin in just a couple moments?
Well, it is very calm here, very quiet out in front of the church as everyone has pretty much made their way inside, getting set for the service to take place. A couple of things really stand out to me. We mentioned before the riderless horse, and they often call that the lone charger. We saw shots of it before. You see the lone horse with the boots in the stirrups backwards, which symbolize the person that they're honoring. Riding backwards, basically looking back at his loved ones and his family and the life he's left behind. I have to imagine that Mike Garbo is smiling this morning seeing these people who have come out to honor him. The other thing, Priscilla, really that stays with me is the people that have come out here. Lupita went over and talked to the people with the flags over there. They're just one of many who have come out here, and they told her that they've been out here since 7 a.m., and they are still there. You can see them back over my shoulder. They're going to have more after the service is over. They have the 21-gun salute. Taps. There's also going to be a reception, and we, of course, will bring that to you. You can watch the service once it gets underway right here on News 4 Tucson, and also, if you're not near a television, on KVOA.com, as well as our Facebook page. But this is not an event anybody wanted to attend, Priscilla, but just seeing the people that have come out here and the strength and the support that the Garbo family is getting from law enforcement from every inch of the globe, from what we're being told here, of course, right here in Tucson and throughout the state. And they're out here, and they're the ones that aren't going to be able to get into the church are talking amongst themselves, and I'm sure telling stories about Mike Garbo and what he meant to them in their lives. So I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful service, and we are really honored to bring it to you. With that, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Yeah, it's been incredible hearing from his colleagues and friends about the life he had, the impact he had on people, and I'm sure we will be hearing all of that and those personal stories of how Garbo touched their lives and everyone else's during this service, set to start in just a couple moments. Now, we are told that flags will fly at half-staff today to honor him. Mike lived a life devoted to serving and caring for others. Now, early on, he graduated from Eastern Illinois University, where he met his wife, Vida. Now, we're being told, my producer's telling me this is a slideshow in the church right now.
Dave asked us to get lined up coincidentally, so we were one step ahead of him, which is rare. So stay loose, we follow him. I'll put some judgments on the commands once I see what's going to happen down here. Same commands, same thing.
You see the honor guard there, and we have now moved back over to the front of the church where they're going to be bringing Mike Garbo's body into the main church, they tell us. You can see in the distance them bringing out the pallbearers. Making their procession, walking as they begin the service. Led by a lone bagpiper and the flag bearers. Mike Garbo's coffin draped with the American flag. Family members following behind. Procession slowly walking into the church as the service will get underway now. See off to the side where we are right now. A line of officers that will eventually have a 21-gun salute. Now that area you just saw where the officer stepped off after honoring Mike Garbo. This is the area where they will also do that 21-gun salute, as I mentioned, and also a reception will take place. We're also told there's going to be a flyover that will happen, as well as taps. And of course, we mentioned the horse. His name is Jake, and he's 16 years old. Mike Garbo was with the DEA for 16 years. We had a chance to speak with his caretaker. He told us that this riderless horse also symbolizes that this horse will never be ridden again. The boots are backwards. And now this service is underway. Honoring Supervisor Special Agent Mike Garbo.
You may be seated. Good morning and welcome on behalf of the family. Thank you everyone for your attendance this morning and support of the family during this difficult time. I invite you to please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we come to you this morning with heavy hearts. I ask first and foremost that you would bring peace and comfort to the family. Peace and comfort to co-workers, friends. Lord, that you would allow your presence to be known. We invite you here with us this morning. I pray specifically as the family moves forward this day, that they would know that there is a God in heaven who promises to never leave them nor forsake them. So we invite you here. Comfort the family, we ask. In your name, amen. Well, this morning we're here to remember Michael G. Garbo. Mike, for many. At age 51, he honorably passed away on October 4th, 2021, while serving his city and his nation. Former police officer for the Metro Nashville PD and current DEA agent based here in Tucson, Arizona since 2005. Mike lived a life devoted to serving and caring for others. Early in life, Mike would graduate from Eastern Illinois University, where he would meet his wife, Rita. Soon after graduation, Michael began a career in law enforcement, a career path inspired by his late father. Michael and Vita would go on to marry, and not long after came their greatest pride in life, their daughter Alexis. Mike was well immersed in his work when he was not home, being the dedicated father and husband he was. He dedicated his life work to combating drug traffickers spanning from Kabul, Afghanistan, and across the United States with unmatched talent, knowledge, dignity, and bravery. His hobbies included practicing jiu-jitsu, martial arts, spending time with his family, and watching his daughter succeed in every aspect of her life. He is preceded in death by his mother and father, Carol and Larry Garbo, and special grandmother, Betty Garbo. Michael is survived by his wife, Vita Garbo, daughter, Alexis Garbo, niece and goddaughter, Kennedy Valenificius, brother, Terry Garbo, and many other loved ones whom he loved until the end. At this time, we'd like to draw your attentions to the screens for a brief video.
The moment was custom made to order. I was riding with my daughter on our way back from Monroe. And like children do, she started playing 20 questions, but I never would have guessed one could touch me to my soul. said, Daddy, when we get to heaven, can I taste the Milky Way? Are we going there to visit, or are we going there to stay? Am I going to see my grandpa? Can I have a pair of wings? And do you think that God could use another angel to help pour out the rain? Well, I thought about it later on, and a smile came to my face. And when I tucked her into bed, I got down on my knees and prayed. Lord, when I get to heaven, can I taste the Milky Way? I don't want to come to visit, 'cause I'm coming home to stay. And I can't wait to see my family and meet Jesus face to face. And do you think, Lord, you could use another angel to help pour out the rain? Can I help pour out the rain? Can I help pour out the rain? La da 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 dee 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 dee. All to Jesus I surrender. All to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him, in His presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all. All to Thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. All to Jesus I surrender. Make me Savior, wholly Thine. Let me feel the Holy Spirit. Truly know that Thou art mine. Oh, I surrender all. I surrender all. All to Thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. All to Jesus I surrender. Lord, I give myself to Thee. Fill me with Thy love and power. Let Thy blessing fall on me. Oh, I surrender all. I surrender all. All to Thee, my blessed
Good morning. As I look around, I see a room full of heavy hearts, hearts who mourn the loss of Supervisory Special Agent Michael Garbo, hearts who lost their best friend, hearts who lost their mentor, and most importantly, two hearts, one who lost her father and one who lost the love of her life. Vita and Alexis Garbo, on behalf of the men and women at the DEA's Phoenix Field Division, you need to know that we grieve with you and we will stand by you. Supervisory Special Agent Garbo was an amazing narcotics investigator, but I don't have to tell you that if you look at all the people in this room that are here to celebrate his life. Mike served his country in the United States Army and spent nearly 3 decades in law enforcement, with the past 25 years focusing on drug investigations. Mike began his career in law enforcement as an officer on the Nashville Metro Police Department. Mike's passion for drug investigations led him to DEA in 2005 when he joined our ranks as a special agent. So lucky for us. Mike's DEA career began in our Nogales resident office. He spent 4 years there before transferring to Afghanistan. In 2001, Mike returned to the Tucson district office, where he earned a promotion to group supervisor. As a group supervisor, Mike led the DEA Border Interdiction Group and was the coordinator for the division's special response team. That's just a small picture from Mike's career, but he left a lasting legacy. We will now hear about his courage, his passion, and his leadership, and also how he enjoyed stirring the pot. I would like to invite Tucson Police Chief Chris Magnus to say a few words.
It's a great privilege for me and the Tucson Police Department to honor the life and service of DEA Special Agent Mike Garbo. Mike's colleagues, the law enforcement community, and all residents of Greater Tucson benefited from Mike's service in ways that will never be fully known or fully appreciated. Now, I've come to know and learn that Mike was more than a dedicated group supervisor. He was a leader, a mentor, and a man who inspired others. TPD's members who worked with him described him as setting the highest bar for public service. He was, by all accounts, the very best kind of cop. Even while consistently demonstrating excellence in his work, he was someone who showed humility, preferring to build his reputation through example. Now, many leave others with an impression. Mike did much more than that. He left an imprint. And what an imprint. As a chief, I'm grateful to Mike for his influence on the TPD members who worked with him, not just to be better officers or supervisors, but to be better people in all aspects of their lives. Very few of us leave behind this kind of legacy. So Mike's colleagues, his friends, and his family should be incredibly proud. And I know they are.
Thank you, Chief. Lieutenant Colonel Ken Hunter, Deputy Director of the Arizona Department of Public Safety.
Good morning. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my deepest sympathies to Veta and Alexis and all of Mike's friends and family. Also, my deepest condolences to the DEA family and the entire Arizona first responder community. Normally, Colonel Silbert would be up here speaking for the Arizona Department of Public Safety. However, I knew Mike. When I heard Mike had been killed, I expressed my disbelief and naturally started telling my DPS colleagues stories about Mike. The more I talked about him, the more I realized he had a big impact on me. So I'm honored for the opportunity to speak and to be here today to pay tribute and honor Mike. I'd like to share some of the stories, if I could, that I told this week. It was about 2005. I was transferred from Phoenix to Tucson. The wife and I decided to move to a growing community called Rancho Cerrita. As we moved into our home, houses were being built all around us. And catty corner from us, a family moved in. I watched this family move in, and I noticed the father. And I'm like, he's a cop. Just, you know, us in the business, we're pretty good at picking each other out. Shortly after, I met Mike and Veta formally and learned he was a DEA agent. I noticed Mike was very quiet, humble, private, but he carried himself in a way you knew he was no nonsense and he was squared away. Except for one thing. At one point, they decided to get a teacup Yorkie, and Mike would literally walk that dog around the neighborhood. And those of you that know Mike are laughing because that is quite the visual. Mike and my routines seemed to coincide. I would see him at the Cerrita gym every morning, which I hated because Mike's work ethic is that of a non-normal human being. But he realized I needed to put more effort in. And then, seeing him with Alexis, you must have only been 3 or 4. But what I remember is Mike dragging you along in a little wagon, and you had all the water wingies, the this, the that, for a fun afternoon at the Rancho Cerrita Water Park. And then I'm watching this tribute, and all I see is you're not out of arm's reach ever. He's either got you here or he's got you by the hand. And then I think there were some pictures at work where you were there. What kid would not love to have a father like Mike? The last time I saw Mike, he was leading a DEA tactical team for a joint DPS-DEA roundup of an investigation we just completed in Tucson. I'd probably not seen Mike in 6 years since I moved back to Phoenix. He embraced me with a hug and we started talking as though we were still neighbors. He asked me how my family was doing, and when I finished, his eyes lit up so that he could give me the update on Veta and Alexis. Mike was well respected in the Arizona law enforcement community because of his leadership, his experience, and his integrity. With the numerous citizen contacts, investigations, narcotic seizures, and arrests Mike made throughout his career, it is impossible to quantify the lives that he has changed or even saved. Mike stayed true to the law enforcement profession and provided an example to be followed in an age of criticism and false rhetoric. He knew this is still the most noble profession on earth. Mike is gone, but he is not gone, because he's left us not one but several examples to follow. I mentioned the impact Mike had on me, and here it is. There's always more effort to give. If you think you've worked out hard enough in the gym, there's more effort to give. If you think you're a good parent or a good spouse, there's more parenting to do and there's more love to give. If you think you have sharpened the skills of your profession, you have more to learn. These are the examples Mike left us. Today we mourn and are saddened by the loss of Mike Garbo, and we are tested with our grief, and we are frustrated by those things we cannot control. We cannot match the sacrifice Mike made, but we can be there for each other, we can be there for Veta, and we can be there for Alexis. And we can strive to match Mike's service and the examples that he has left us.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to have Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, United States Department of Justice.
Good morning. On behalf of the entire Department of Justice family, including the thousands of law enforcement agents who risk their lives every day to keep us safe, I want to extend my deepest condolences to Mike Garbo's family, his friends, and his colleagues. To Veta, Alexis, Terry, and the other members of the Garbo family, to Administrator Milgram and the members of the DEA family, and to all of the Arizona law enforcement community, I'm humbled to stand with you, the many of you who had the privilege to know and love Mike Garbo. Today we honor his courage, his dedication, and we recognize the ultimate sacrifice he made in being taken too suddenly, too soon. Today we remember Mike Garbo for the extraordinary man he was, and we celebrate a life lived with courage, with purpose, with valor. I've learned a little bit about Mike Garbo in the last few days, about the incredible courage and service he rendered that led to his death. I've learned about his decades of service before that, as has been talked about already, his service in Afghanistan as an Army National Guardsman, as a Nashville Police Department member, and yes, as his more than 16 years of service as a DEA special agent, ultimately as group supervisor. For decades, Mike Garbo dedicated himself to service. In the words of the DEA core values, faithful and effective service to his country and to its citizens. I've learned that he believed in the integrity of his profession and the mission of his agency. I've learned that he was a devoted father to Alexis, and that you, Alexis, were his pride. I've learned that those he served with looked up to him, and that they could always count on him to be by their side. The mission of the Department of Justice is to protect this country and to serve the rule of law, and Mike Garbo did that every single day. He gave his own life to keep Americans safe from dangerous drugs and those who traffic in them, and his heroism was on display along with the courageous members of the Tucson Police Department who undoubtedly saved the lives of Special Agent Fox and Task Force Officer Hank Studler. Over the last few days, I have heard a lot about Mike Garbo from those who knew him best. And the thing that sticks with me is the number of times the following four words keep coming up over and over again, and we've already heard them this morning. Hero, warrior, leader, mentor. He was the one everyone turned to for help, not just because he was a tremendous source of knowledge, but because he was so dependable, so willing always to lend a hand. And the reflections sound the same theme over and over again. He was the one you wanted by your side, from the simplest tasks to the most complex and dangerous. He was the first in. he was the one who led the way. He was a model for those he served with. He was a leader, and true leaders show us the way. In the words of one of his colleagues, I strive to be like Mike. When dealing with a tactically challenging situation, I ask myself, how would Mike Garbo handle this? Of course, he was more than a law enforcement leader and professional. He was, as we know, a loving husband, devoted father, and friend. And for all of you who knew and loved him, there are no words that can ease the pain of his loss. But I hope you will know that we know that he did not serve alone. To Veda and Alexis and Mike's family, his service is your service. His sacrifice is your sacrifice. The support in this room is testament to the strength of this community and those who knew and loved him most. Today we honor a hero who gave his life in service of his country and his community. We will not forget him. In the days ahead, I hope you can find solace in cherished memories and comfort in knowing that his legacy lives on in the people that he touched and in the many people he inspired to serve like Mike. We remember him for the extraordinary life he led, one with purpose, with compassion, and with valor. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, ma'am. We want to invite members of the group who work closely with Mike from the Counter Narcotic Alliance.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here to honor and pay tribute to our teammate, our friend, and our brother, Mike Garbo. My name is Jesse Chamberlain, and I'm a sergeant with the Tucson Police Department. With me today are Detectives Gabe Lopez, Dan Bowling, Officer Phil Hangseller, and recently promoted Sergeant Dave Ortiz, who, prior to his recent promotion, was part of our group. Joining us remotely is DEA Special Agent Steve Fox, who I'm sure most of you know is recovering in the hospital from his recently sustained injuries. And Steve, we know you can hear us. We know you wish you could be here, but we can feel your presence here with us today. Mike and I co-supervise our group, known at the Counter Narcotics Alliance as the Mid-Level Transportation Group, and known as the Border Interdiction Group within the DEA. We stand together because that is how we operated on a daily basis, as one team. That was Mike's vision when he was promoted to supervisor. There was no titles or labels within our group. There was no Tucson Police Department or DEA. There was just one team. If one of us was going to get recognition, then we all would get recognition. If one of us got a big seizure, then we all got a big seizure. Everything Mike did at work was focused on the team, and our successes can be attributed to the teamwork he exemplified. But I can tell you right now, our team is broken. And our team is hurting. But as a team, we're going to get through this. And we will honor Mike's sacrifice by returning to the fight. And his legacy will continue through us, because legacy is not leaving something for people, it's leaving something in people. And for the rest of our days, we will always have a piece of Mike in our hearts, in our minds.
Good morning. I'm Sergeant David Ortiz. On behalf of the Mid-Level Transportation Group, we want to extend our deepest condolences to Mike's daughter Alexis, his wife Beda, the Garbo family, the DEA, and also the Mid-Level Transportation Group known as MLTG. When I first met Mike in 2016, he was a teammate of ours in the CNA interdiction squad. Sergeant Jesse Chamberlain was the leader of our squad, and Mike helped build a strong team by stepping out as an informal leader and training all of us in the various aspects of criminal interdiction. Mike was an expert in the art and science of interdiction. He put the time into learning, watching, studying human behavior. If something was off, Mike would pick up on it. He'd turn and smile and gesture with a hand to alert us what was going on. He could detect deception like no other. He would explain the subtle differences in voice inflection, body language, and overall demeanor. Mike was promoted to group supervisor, and he continued to mentor, train, and work side by side with all of us. We will always have a part of Mike with us for the rest of our lives. There wasn't a place in this country that Mike didn't know someone or similarity that would know him. Mike taught us that networking was the single most important tool to have in the art of interdiction. You could introduce yourself at a conference in Kansas City, Chicago, Orlando, and inevitably someone would say, "Tucson, huh? Do you know Mike Garbo?" And we would proudly respond, "Why, yes, he's our teammate." Mike also possessed a keen sense of analyzing information. Without going into too much detail, Mike could determine the pattern of behavior, the travel destination, and be nearly 100% on the money. But no matter what operation or training we were on, he made it clear that Alexis was his #1 priority. And he passed the torch to any of us that day because he trained us right and trusted us to handle business. We remember Mike talking about his daughter getting her driver's license and driving for the first few weeks. He was proud of her and at the same time worried about her and what other stupid drivers were on the road. He would speak about Alexis's events at school and how proud he was when she graduated. He loved you, Alexis, very much. I'm going to miss him calling my name several times, each time getting progressively louder because of my hearing. He'd approach my desk, and to all of us, he would gesture in this fashion, which means indicating it was time for chow. God, I wish I could go to the spot with him, with all of us right now. Mike, you were tragically taken from us. That will never go away. Part of us died there on that train station that day. But we all knew that outlaws used the train, and that regardless of what many may think about guns, money, and drugs, Mike said that amongst these outlaws are unidentified murderers, bank robbers, and violent gang members, that needed to be stopped. Mike would say, "Press forward, brothers, disrupt their business." We are criminal interdiction, and it's a dangerous job, but only a select few of us are willing to do it. We love you, brother. You are the American legend.
And we've been given the privilege and the honor to be able to present Alexis with something. It's a plaque, and I know that we've been referring to Mike as Mike using his first name, but I think the majority of the law enforcement community probably knew him better just as Garbo. That's what everyone called him. People would say, "Do you know Garbo?" "Yeah, I know Garbo." So the plaque that we have was actually something that was passed through his family, and the title of the plaque says Garbo. And I'm going to have Phil Hangseller read what it says.
Garbo. You got it from your father. It was all he had to give. So it's yours to use to cherish for as long as you may live. If you lose the watch he gave you, it can always be replaced. But a black mark on your name can never be erased. It was clean the day you took it, and a worthy name to bear. When he got it from his father, there was no dishonor there. So make sure you guard it wisely. After all is said and done, you'll be glad the name is spotless when you give it to your son.
Thank you. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Jason Wheeler.
Good morning. I first met Mike Garbo in 2006 when I got assigned to Nogales resident office out of the academy. During this time, I had the distinct pleasure of working alongside him. He taught me how to become a DEA agent, and more importantly, the person we all inspired to be on this job. Mike was Mr. Everything, as everybody knows. He was the best shooter, the most tactical, the most fit, the best leader, the best storyteller, the biggest jokester, and one of the best agents to ever work for DEA. Over the past 16 years, our families became close as we watched our kids grow up together. I had the great opportunity to work with Mike in both Nogales and Tucson. As many of you heard today, both Mike and Terry Garbo's parents passed away over this past year. Terry Garbo is here with us today. Over this past week, the family has been telling many stories about Mike, especially in his younger days. Throughout the Garbo family, it was commonly known that Mike's family nicknamed him Mackerel, though no one knows why. But what is not so commonly known is that Mike's family also called him Pick. And there's a good story behind this. Apparently, when Mike and his family would go out to eat, no matter how fancy the restaurant, Mike would always get pickles. Going so far as to sneak the pickles from the pickle barrels and taking handfuls at a time. Mike also had a nickname for his brother Terry, whom he lovingly referred to as Bubba. Also, over this past week, the family has been going through many documents, and Mike's wife, Vida, came across this real treasure. In 2016, Mike's parents, Larry and Carol Garbo, wrote Mike a letter. This letter gives voice to his parents here today. June 26, 2016. Dear Mike, I wanted to take a few minutes to tell you how proud your mother and I are of you. From high school on, you have worked hard and smart to graduate college and make an exemplary career with the Nashville Police Department and the DEA. In spite of problems that would have defeated a lesser man, you have persevered to build a great career and family. We are extremely proud of you, your family, and your career. Alexis seems to be following in the footsteps of you and Vida. This is due directly to the responsible parenting you and Vida provided. We love all of you and are extremely proud of all of you. Hope to see you soon. Love, Mom and Dad. Vida and Alexis, you both meant the world to Mike. Vida, you were the love of Mike's life from the moment he saw you in college. As we all know, Mike loved bantering with you. Alexis, your dad always looked forward to taking you on trips everywhere, from Phoenix to San Diego to your concerts. Your dad was so proud of you and bragged every chance he got. Everything he did was for you and your mom. All he wanted to see you both happy and successful. To the entire Garbo family, look around. I want you to see the magnitude of the lives Mike has touched. He sure has touched mine. God bless you all.
Thank you, Jason. DEA Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Polo Ruiz.
Sometimes you get the chicken, sometimes you get the feathers. I can't tell you how many times I heard Mike say that when we were on the street. Or how many times I rolled my eyes when all we got was feathers. Or how many times I patted him on the back when we finally got the chicken. Not only was Mike a meticulous and productive investigator, but he exuded leadership among his peers. He motivated, encouraged, supported, and mentored everyone around him, both at work and his personal life. I was lucky enough to meet Michael when he began his career with DEA. I was his first-line supervisor in Nogales, and everybody always used to talk about Mike. I want to be like Mike. And I started thinking the same thing. I want to be like Mike. I was lucky enough to follow his career, and when he told me that he wanted to go to Kabul, that moment I laid out every single prayer, because I know that he wanted to come back safe and sound to Alexis and Vida. And every day I would pray for his return. He returned safely back home to Tucson. And luckily for us, he promoted. He was a leader back then, and now he's a leader with us again. Immediately, I identified Michael as a charismatic, knowledgeable, and also known for stirring the pot. If the people who know Mike, you know what I mean. He always made people laugh.
He had an undying passion for arresting bad guys. Mike was unique. He brought a plethora of assets to DEA, including his time as a Nashville police officer, where he served as a SWAT team officer. He also brought his wife Vera and his daughter Alexis into our lives, as he talked about them constantly. He and I would always have fireside chats, and we would always talk about our daughters and what we wanted the best for them. And I know, Alexis, he wanted the best for you. He beamed with pride every time he even so mentioned Alexis. When you work with somebody every day, you can't help but learn a lot about them. And you really learn a lot about them when you put your lives in each other's hands. Mike's team and his colleagues always knew that Mike is one of those guys you can count on no matter what. He never, ever took sole credit for his successes. He would always say and tell me, no, that was my team that did it. We look up to Mike and to the leader that he became within the DEA. He will always be a part of us. And our younger agents who were lucky enough to work with him will carry Mike's teachings with them always. I would like to leave you with this message for Mike. And knowing Mike, he hated when I called him Michael. I don't know why. He would want you to know that he still got your back. Be safe, and he has, as he said so many times, do the right thing. I'm going to miss you, brother.
Thank you, Polo. DEA Administrator Ann Milgram.
Today we mourn the loss of DEA Group Supervisor Mike Garbo. We know the daily dangers and challenges of our work, but nothing can prepare us to lose one of our own. Nothing can prepare us to lose a member of the DEA family. Mike Garbo led a life of service. He joined DEA in 2005 and was assigned here in Nogales, Arizona. I am so deeply grateful to Veda, to Alexis, to Terry, and to other members of the DEA family who took time this week to teach me about Mike's life and Mike's work. I learned that Mike Garbo was good at everything. I learned that Mike Garbo was an incredible mentor. I learned that Mike Garbo was a devoted father and husband. I learned that Mike Garbo was an incredible leader who always led from the front. When I say that Mike Garbo was good at everything, he was actually good at everything, which is an incredible thing for a special agent. Mike was a tactical expert who took hundreds of doors with skill and preparation. Mike was a legal expert. He became the subject matter expert in the Tucson U.S. Attorney's Office for all narcotics cases. Mike was the go-to in the office on everything, whether it was a high-risk operation or it was even DEA paperwork. Mike sweated the details, and he was good at it all. Mike was an incredible mentor. I have heard from countless agents, task force officers, and others who have told me that Mike always took an extra minute. He always spent the time to help someone, to teach someone, and to do it in a way that was patient and supportive. I learned about Mike's devotion to being at Alexis's dance recitals at every single event she had in her life. And the highest compliment, Alexis, I can give to you is what so many members of the DEA family have told me, which is that you are a mini Mike. Mike was also a true leader. Mike led from the front. He was always the first to go in. When it came time to do surveillance, Mike was the first one out, and he was the last one back. One of Mike's teammates told me that sometimes you would be out on surveillance with him, and you'd be sitting for hours, and nothing was happening. And someone would say, "Is it time to call it?" And Mike would patiently reply, "Let's stay just a little longer." The constant theme in my conversations this week has been that Mike was the best of the best, that he raised the bar for all of us at DEA. And countless agents have told me that Mike Garbo was the best agent they ever saw. Mike's devotion to DEA and to his country led him to volunteer in 2009 for our toughest assignment. Mike volunteered to go to Afghanistan for 2 full years. It was a difficult and dangerous assignment. And it took Mike away from his beloved wife, Veda, and from his daughter, Alexis. He missed 2 years of Alexis growing up. One of Mike's teammates in Afghanistan told me, "We sweated together, we froze together, we lived together, and we worked together." He added, "I loved Mike like a brother. If Mike had called me and asked me to walk across the country to change a flat tire, I would have been there." When Mike was leaving Afghanistan, he had a choice to make. The first time Mike came out here to the Phoenix Field Division, that decision was made by the DEA. But when Mike was leaving Afghanistan, he could have picked any office in the United States of America or the world where DEA operates. And Mike made a choice. He made a choice to come home here, to come back to Tucson and Nogales. Mike wanted to come back because he and Veda and Alexis had built a home here. They had built their life here. Mike loved this community. He loved the people that he worked with. And Mike Garbo loved his work. There was nothing that Mike Garbo loved more than being out in the field and on the street with his team. Mike loved doing drug interdiction work. And he knew that his work mattered. He understood that his work saved lives. This is the work that Mike Garbo was doing on Monday. It is his life's work. And it is our work at DEA. Mike's work is our work. Our work has never been more important than it is today. The need for effective law enforcement, local, state, and federal, has never been greater. And it is why we will be relentless day in and day out in continuing this work and in continuing our mission. To Veda, to Alexis, to Terry, Mike is a hero. It's Mike's tactical skills, his preparation, his experience, his leadership, his mentorship of his team. That is why Steve and Phil are with us today. And it is why other members of the public, passengers and crew on that Amtrak train were not harmed. I am so deeply grateful for Mike Garbo's service. Veda, Alexis, and Terry, Mike was a beloved member of our DEA family. You will always, always be a part of our family. I want to close by saying that Mike leaves us today, but that his legacy will live on forever at DEA. Mike's legacy will live on because he showed all of us what it means to be an exceptional special agent. Mike's legacy will live on when you are out on surveillance and you decide to stay just a little bit longer. Mike's legacy will live on when you take an extra minute to mentor a fellow agent, a fellow officer, or someone in your community. Mike's legacy will live on when you sweat the details as you go over your DEA paperwork or you double-check your ops plan. And Mike's legacy will live on when you lead from the front. May Group Supervisor Mike Garbo rest in eternal peace, and may his legacy live on in the righteous and just work that we will do in his name. Thank you.
Thank you all for your words of encouragement and memories of Mike. My name is Sherry Oz, and I'm the Special Agent in charge of the DEA Phoenix Field Division. There are no words to describe our devastation. For the DEA Phoenix Field Division, Mike's friends and family, colleagues, and law enforcement worldwide, the world stopped on Monday, October 4th, 2021. Supervisory Special Agent Michael Garbo and 2 team members started off their week doing what they normally do in order to keep the public safe from crime, violence, and drugs. Mike Garbo put on a pair of wrinkled shorts, kissed his wife goodbye, and told her he'd be home in time to take the dog out. What they didn't know, what their team didn't know, is that that day they would encounter evil, and Mike would never come home again. The impact of this tragic event reverberated throughout law enforcement and the community. The bravery, sacrifice, and courage demonstrated by Supervisory Special Agent Michael Garbo and his partners will never be forgotten. Every day I talk with my people, and I know this hurt every person in the Phoenix Field Division and in the law enforcement community. I also know the workers in the division, and Mike was both a worker and a leader. His investigations made significant impact in the quality of life of the community that he served. His work with the Counter Narcotics Alliance team connected him with DEA divisions across the country and even did investigations overseas. As we all know, Supervisory Special Agent Garbo led by example, even to the very end. He was truly a man of integrity, whose dedication to justice was clear to all those that worked with him, and his legacy will live on in all of us who he inspired. Mike came to work every day with grit and determination. Teamwork was his mantra, and his daily work involved encountering the unknown. Imagine the courage it takes to do that job. That is what heroes are made of. And it was Supervisory Special Agent Garbo is that hero. Garbo is a true American hero whose priorities were his family, the DEA mission, saving lives, and getting his team home safe every night. Mike loved his job so much, and I know that if he had that day to do over, he wouldn't have wanted anyone to take his place. On Monday, he laid down his sword in battle. It is our responsibility to pick up that sword and continue the fight. To the law enforcement community, thank you for being here today, and thank you for what you're going to do tomorrow and the next day. We owe that to Garbo. I would like to thank Mike's family and friends for sharing Mike with us. We are honored and humbled to have been a part of his life. And we are better for having known him. We consider Mike's family part of our family, and the DEA family never forgets. Garbo, we love you.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise to only great are you. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise to only. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our love, so we pour out our praise to only. Shouts of praise, hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth shouts your praise, hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth shouts your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord.
Purpose, bravery, courage, sacrifice, honor. These are the words which characterize the life of a man who lived well. And they certainly are the words that describe the life of Mike. But inasmuch as they describe his life and dedication to that which he cared for most, it also speaks to something equally as important and impactful as his life. We've heard it, his legacy. The legacy of a man who lived out his calling, served others, served our country, served our community, and ultimately laid down his life in the service to others. In a verse that's very near and dear to us in law enforcement, it's found in the book of John, chapter 15, verse 13, where Jesus says, "Greater love has no man than this, than he who lays down his life for a friend." Mike laid down his life in the service of others. As testified this morning, he lived well and he finished well. This is that legacy in which we will honor this morning, in the days, in the weeks, in the months, and in the years to come. The family shared a verse we would like to share with you today. And it's found in Romans chapter 8, beginning in verse 28, where Paul the Apostle, writing to the church of Rome, says this: "And we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." Paul, writing to the church of Rome, he pens one of the most powerful and well-known verses in the pages of Scripture, but he wrote that verse at a very difficult season of his life. Paul was able to write verse 28 because of verses 1 through 27 and verses 29 through the end of the chapter. And what Paul understood was that in Christ there is hope beyond the grave. There is hope beyond this life. He understood that this life was not the end for us. Because of the cross and because of Christ, we have the promise of and the hope of heaven. In fact, he would later write in the same chapter, in verses 38 and 39, "For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor power, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love that God has, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Paul understood that there would come a time when all of this will end. And in speaking of heaven, Revelations chapter 21, verse 4, we read, "And God will wipe away every tear from their eye, and there shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things of this world has passed away." The former things, the wickedness, everything that we see on this side of eternity that causes us to go, something is broken. Paul says there is going to come a time when it will not be affecting us. And he also understood that in the midst of trials and tribulation, in the midst of the darkest seasons of our lives, there is a God in heaven who promises that he will never leave us, that he will never forsake us. The Bible teaches that God can turn tragedy into testimony or make beauty from ashes. The Bible teaches that God enters into the seasons of suffering with us. That he doesn't just give us a few Bible verses and hope we make it through the day, but he actually enters into this season and oftentimes carries us through the darkest seasons of our lives with the hope of certainty the best is yet to come. Paul understood that no matter how chaotic life may be, there is a God in heaven who promises that all the perplexities of life are going somewhere good. It's been said that in heaven, there will be no more 911 calls. We will have no need to keep the peace because Christ will be our peace. In closing, I have 2 verses I want to share this morning. One is for you, Alexis. And it's found in Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, where God is about to equip a young man to do great things. And he says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." May you know that. May you know He is with you wherever your feet may take you. Vervita, my verse for you. Psalms chapter 34, verse 18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. May you experience His love, His peace, and His presence like never before as you walk this season of your life. May you know that He will carry you through. He will see you through the other side. He will never leave you, nor will He ever forsake you. In this room, to the Garbo family, again, as already has been expressed, you have a family who will always be there for you. But may you take comfort in knowing that you have a God in heaven who neither sleeps nor slumbers. And whether it's the early morning hours of the night, know that He will carry you through. On behalf of Calvary Tucson and our pastoral staff, we offer our sincere condolences. Know that we are praying for you. Know that we are here for you. Whatever you need, anything at all, no matter the time of day, we are here. We extend the same to the DEA, its agents, and to the rest of the family and friends of the Garbo family. We also extend the same to the Tucson Police Department, his squad, Phil, Sarge. We love you, and we are here for you. Please don't hesitate to give us a call. Would you please join me in a closing prayer? Oh, Father, we know that your word tells us that you do give life, that you mend the wounds of the brokenhearted. And as was already described this morning, our hearts are heavy, but Lord, you know how to meet us exactly where we are at. I ask for comfort and peace to those who are here, to those who will suit up later today, tomorrow, to continue to answer the call, to do their jobs. Lord, would you protect them? We pray for confusion in the enemy camp, and we ask that you would go before them, giving them wisdom and insight in all that they do. We again ask that you would comfort this family, that in the days and weeks and months to come, that you would bless them with a tremendous sense of your peace and your presence. We thank you for the hope that we have in Christ, that the best is yet to come. And we have that hope not, we cross our fingers and close our eyes, we hope, but we have the hope with certainty, which is why Paul is able to write, we know all things will work together. Because, Lord, you are sovereign. So bless this group, bless this family. Pour out your Holy Spirit. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. At this time, we are going to prepare for the outdoor portion of our ceremony. This will officially conclude the indoor portion. We are going to have the family exit the sanctuary, escorted by honor guard. So would you please stand as they exit the sanctuary? At this time, we will ask that all law enforcement, uniformed personnel, military, please exit to the front of the building. You will get your assignments on where to stand for the outdoor ceremonial honors. For all civilians, we ask that you please remain in the sanctuary until all law enforcement has exited the building. You are dismissed for that.
As you can see right now, the family exiting the church after the service as they begin another ceremony out here. It's going to involve not a 21-gun salute, but what they call 3 volleys. And what that signifies is its origins are in European wars, and it would signify a pause in combat so that those lost could be honored. 3 volleys then signify that combat would resume. The fight goes on. You heard the clergy there talk about allowing the law enforcement personnel to exit first as they come out here to surround this little plaza that they've created where they will have the salute. We're also expecting what I've been told, a flyover and then taps. But it was a packed house for Mike Garbo, and as we continue to listen to people take the stage there in the church, it was very clear they were not just talking about a co-worker. They were talking about someone who was a brother, as much family as their own blood. And testimony after testimony talking about what an incredible individual Mike Garbo was. Some of the agents that he worked with, some of the other officers he worked with, talking about how he was incredible, someone who could just who had studied and mastered human behavior, who could tell what someone might be thinking before they went and did something bad, and he was ahead of them. And then also, time and time again, them mentioning his family, what Veda and Alexis, his daughter, meant to him and were first in his life, no matter what he was doing. I don't know if others knew. We had mentioned before that he had been involved in operations in Kabul, Afghanistan. I don't think many knew he spent 2 years there, sacrificing a good portion of time from his family to do that. And always in the fight, combating the drug trafficking problem that we see worldwide. The crowd continues to come out, gathering here. As I mentioned, they're going to have another ceremony out here. The 3 volleys, the shots. To my right, you can see the officers lined up, awaiting that call. You can see in the background there, we've been talking about people coming here from all over. The 2 individuals over there with the blue flags supporting the police. They've been out here since 7 a.m. And it is a beautiful day, but it is hot, and people didn't waver. They stayed here to honor Mike Garbo. A beautiful service, and as I said, so many people who took that stage that we kept hearing time and time again. As Lupita mentioned to me, we just kept hearing people say hero, warrior, leader, and mentor. And you heard the DEA administrator as she stood up there and said his legacy will live on, and how these agents and these officers can carry on his legacy by mentoring others. And as she said, he was always first in. Always leading the way for his brothers and sisters that were in the fight with him. See the immediate family up front there. Very emotional day. As you can see, as people coming out, hugging. So many beautiful words said about Mike Garbo in there as we listened via the live stream. People still coming out. There was a lot of people in there. The capacity of this church is 2,400 people, and I don't believe there was an empty seat in there. As I said, they're going to have a flyover. We've got jets nearby, A-10s. I don't think that's the one, but we're expecting that to happen. Also TAPS. And as you know, we've talked about the Counter Narcotics Alliance. That was the task force that was working that morning, Monday morning, that were sweeping that train. Say they're hurting, but he vowed they will fight on. And you know, these people they really are incredible. They say running towards the danger, but they also said, the leader of the DEA, how they're never prepared for something like this. They're never prepared to lose one of their own. Lost one that they will never forget. You heard it in the words time and time again what Mike Garbo did for and meant to all these people you see that have gathered here. Priscilla, we've got this ceremony about to continue here. Meantime, though, we'll be right here, and I'm sure you'll get back to us soon, but right now I'll send it back to you.
Thank Thank you, Sean. Yeah, just as you said, beautiful and very touching ceremony this morning, what you just saw, remembering the life of Michael Garbo. Now, some of the takeaways that really spoke to the impact he had on those around him, so many amazing speakers speaking on, personal experience they had with him, and also just talking with law enforcement and his colleagues about who he was. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco saying that when she spoke with his colleagues and friends, she said the 4 words that kept coming up when describing Garbo: hero, warrior, leader, and mentor. He was the one that people turned to for help. He was the one they said that you wanted by your side. They also said that he was the first in and he led the way. The support in the room really spoke to the impact he had on the community. Tucson Police Chief Chris Magnus spoke as well. He spoke to how Garbo was a leader and mentor that inspired others. Tucson police members describing him as setting the highest bar of public service and that he left a lasting legacy. We also heard from an assistant special agent in charge, and he said these final thoughts, which I thought were very powerful. He said that Mike would want you to know he still has your back and do the right thing. Really powerful there. We can see, taking a live look now, right outside Calvary Chapel. There's an honor guard. We see all the law enforcement outside. As Sean said, there's going to be a ceremony and then a flyover. Again, really moving to who Garbo was and the lasting impact he made on the community and those around him. Again, those 4 words: mentor, leader. One story that had the crowd laughing, though, Lieutenant Colonel Ken Hunter, Deputy Director of Arizona Department of Public Safety, he talked about how he was Garbo's neighbor. And when Garbo moved in, his family moved into that neighborhood, Hunter was talking about how he just knew that Garbo was in law enforcement. He was very quiet, humble, private, and then he got the crowd laughing, talking about how they got a teacup Yorkie and how Garbo would walk around the neighborhood with his little dog. We heard many stories of his daughter Alexis and how much she meant to him and their bond. And before the ceremony even started, they had a beautiful slideshow showing many family photos, showing pictures with colleagues, and a lot of the photos had him and his daughter Alexis, and he was always by her side, a very loving husband and father. Again, we're just waiting on a salute and also a flyover outside of Calvary Church. Sean, what can you see from your vantage point there?
Well, it is an extremely large crowd, Priscilla, and we see the motorcycle officers are all lined up to the left of us here as they await the start of the ceremony. And as I mentioned, we are waiting for the 3 volleys when the officers here standing at attention will fire those weapons. Of course, they're blanks, but it's very symbolic. I kind of told you a bit of the story of what is behind that, but it signifies a pause in combat to honor those who have fallen, as we are certainly doing here today. The 3 shots, we're told, and is to signify that the fighting continues, and they're now just getting set to bring the casket out of Mike Garbo for this ceremony out here outside. And if you recall, I read some words off a card that they passed out to us before, and during the service they brought out a plaque that had the word Garbo on it and all those words that I recited earlier that they gave to his daughter Alexis. so many heartfelt moments, so many emotional moments here today. So I want to bring Lupita in because Lupita was listening throughout as well. And I know a few times it was tough for you to even listen, Lupita. But what really stood out to you in some of these comments that people who attended here today and spoke?
I think the overwhelming words, the overwhelming of support. But what stuck in my mind was hero.
Yeah.
He was a leader. He was a mentor, and he was also a warrior. And he truly believed in the mission of interdicting drugs. This was the team that he had helped put together, interdiction of drugs, which is what he was doing on Monday. And he believed in that because he truly believed that you need to get these drugs off the streets before they get into the community.
And he walked the walk.
He absolutely did.
Over and over again how he was first in.
The team, Sergeant Jesse Chamberlain from the Counter-Narcotics Alliance was there when this happened, when this went down, and you heard those words that he said about how the team is hurting and they're mourning, but they will continue to pick up the work that they started to do.
Yeah.
And there was another mention about how he believed in the mission of DEA, and that was to protect the public.
And I wrote even a line down here that they said that a part of them died on Monday.
I remember that. Yes, they did. And in essence, part of them did.
He was not somebody they just worked with.
No. It's family. It was family.
Yeah.
And that whole team sticks together. You saw one of them that just came up to us right before we went on the air to talk to us, to tell us how it's been a bad week for them.
Lupita, I think that we both kind of looked at each other when they were talking about his mission to Afghanistan.
Yes.
It wasn't just over for a couple of weeks.
2 years.
2 years.
2 years with the family that he loved the most.
Yeah.
But that is how strong he was in his beliefs about getting drugs off the streets.
And, missing 2 years of his daughter growing up. But that's how committed he was.
And I was also taken when one of the speakers said that looking at his daughter was a mirror of the father.
They called her Mini Mike.
Mini Mike. I love that.
Yeah. I'm sure he will carry on his legacy proudly.
I'm sure she will.
I know the words on that plaque say son, but I'm sure that, like we said, she's Mini Mike.
She's Mini Mike.
She's every bit as much of a child and everything he could be proud of, whether it was a son or a daughter.
And Mike also believed in networking, and networking with agents and officers from all over the country.
Yeah.
So when somebody said so-and-so is from Tucson, they'd say, oh, you know Mike Garbo?
Yeah, you must know Mike Garbo. That is quite a compliment.
It is. And this is a true testament of what people thought of Mike. Look at this. I mean, I don't know what the degrees is, but it looks like it's over 100 as far as I'm concerned, because the sun is beating down on us. But you see all these people here, and it doesn't matter because they're here to honor the man, his service, and his legacy.
Ladies and gentlemen, stand by for the honors portion of our ceremony.
Agents, honor guard, officers, and all uniformed personnel, attend, aim! Ready! Aim! Ready! Aim! Reason up! Reason up! Honor Guard, and all uniformed personnel. Comrade, rest. agents, honor guard, officers, and all uniformed personnel. Attention! Hut!
4401. 4401. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Michael Garbo. Thank you for your dedication, loyalty, and service to the citizens of the United States of America. For nearly 30 years, you have served the public with integrity, character, and honor. We thank you for your dedication. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Rest in peace. 4401, Forever 107. End of watch, October 4th, 2021. Rest easy.
On behalf of the Attorney General of the United States of America, the Administrator of the DEA, and the Pipe Major of the DEA Black and Gold Pipes and Drums, I'm honored to be the piper selected to present Special Agent Michael Garbo with his final salute. Special Agent Michael Garbo, you, sir, you have stood the line. You have done so with honor, duty, and integrity. We can ask no more from any man. As we gather here today, it is time for you, sir, to lay down your sword. And for us, to lay you to rest. Thank you for your service. And you will not, and I repeat, you will not be forgotten.
This will conclude the honors portion of the ceremony.
All units, dismiss!
We see now as the ceremony out here in the parking lot of the Calvary Church begins to wrap up, the procession again, all of the officers on their motorcycles, all these other law enforcement vehicles ready to continue with Mike Garbo on his journey. Just an amazing, emotional ceremony out here in the parking lot, so rich in symbolism and tradition. They had the 3 volleys symbolizing a pause in combat to honor the fallen. Those 3 shots then signifying the fight continues. I'm sure Mike Garbo would not have it any other way. But we saw, as I mentioned, the symbolism here with the volley and then the lone charger, the horse we talked about before, Jake, here to honor Mike Garbo. The boots turned backwards into the stirrups to signify his life, and his family, and his loved ones he leaves behind. They also had an end of watch, 4407. For Mike Garbo, as the session begins to leave the area here. And Lupita, there's not a dry eye in this parking lot. It is just so powerful.
And
Full honors for Mike Garbo.
There he goes.
As the hearse
His final
passes
resting
here.
place. May you rest in peace, Mike.
And there's this crowd here begins to disperse, but I don't think anybody wants to leave because they are trying to hold on to this.
It was very emotional. Even if you didn't know Mike, by the end, you think you knew him.
Well, exactly, and it's a shame, Lupita, that it takes an event like this to remind us once again that what our law enforcement from all these different agencies mean to our community and what they do every day going out the door. And if you're part of that family when he or she leaves the other side of that door, they may not come back in. And that was the case with the Garbo family.
Exactly. He said to his wife, I'll be back in time to walk the dog. And he never walked through that door again. And that's just something that when you take on this responsibility and this job, that's the reality.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, full honors here today. If you watch the live stream, so much incredible testimony from people, as we said, who were very close to Mike. Obvious that to anybody listening that he was family to them.
And he treated you that way.
Yes.
Once he got to know you, you were family. And he watched out for you. And so just as he watched out for the entire community.
So many quotes. I mean, we couldn't write them down fast enough of memorable things that people said about him. The themes really, though, coming out of it is that he lived for this job. He believed in what he was doing every day. Trafficking, trying to stop the trafficking of drugs in our country and around the world. Spent 2 years in Afghanistan, really giving up a life here for his family, who we also heard meant more to him than anything else in the whole world.
And he started his career with DEA in Nogales, and as we understood it, that when he got back from Afghanistan, he had a choice to go to anywhere in the world that he wanted to go, where DEA was. And he chose to come back here to southern Arizona, because this is the place where he had built a home for his wife and his daughter and his friends. That speaks volumes of the man.
And when you talk about the job he did, the administrator from the DEA talked about he was an expert in everything. There wasn't anything that he failed at for them. He was the go-to guy for every single operation. He had this instinct about him to be able to recognize human behavior. When things were ready to go south, they said he would get a little smile and would signal the guys that something's going to happen, and that he was usually right about that.
And another thing that was kind of interesting, it said that when they'd been on surveillance all night long and they were tired, and they'd say, well, is it time to wrap it up? And he'd say, no, let's just stay a little bit longer.
Yeah.
A little bit longer.
And that's what these people want to do, holding on to the memories. And Lupita, they had a gentleman who at the end he didn't need a microphone, talking about the life that Mike Garbo lived, and that he would never, and he said, I repeat, never be forgotten. You see
Sheriff
Nanos over there. Sheriff, how are you?
And also
representing a lot of the law enforcement
Buddy
agencies
James,
here.
Right. We also saw Oro Valley Police Chief Kara Riley. She was here as well.
Yes, who's been in law enforcement here for many years. We saw a flyover that was coming, and a group of helicopters, and as they went by, you could see they represented a number of agencies: TPD,
PCSO,
DPS, yes, and then also at the end. So it was just amazing. I said full honors. They honored this man for what he did, and his legacy will certainly live on.
Sheriff? Yes.
Can I get one of those?
No. Sheriff?
How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you, sir.
Jeff, you're inside. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were going through today, and what all law enforcement is?
Well, it's just supporting the family, and it's a large family. It's, the Garbo family, the mom, the daughter, the mom, the wife. Just really to see the tribute from him to his community and to his department and his agency, but to his family was really what touched me. Just really a dedicated husband, dedicated father, dedicated brother, just a good
Very
man.
emotional.
Oh, absolutely. These are always emotional, but just a good man, and it's a loss. Not just for our community, but for the nation as well, because he did work all over. He went to National Guard, went to KVOA. I learned so much about this man. Just a wonderful man who gave it all the way to the very end. He gave it all.
Yeah. And as one gentleman in there said to the family, you want to see what he meant to people. Look around in this room, and certainly not everyone here may have known him personally, but they're here to represent him. And what is it about the law enforcement community when something like this happens, the family comes together?
That's really it. It's just that we all know that any day could be our time. You just don't know. I think in my mind, this young man woke up on Monday morning, went into work, as he did every Monday morning, but he wasn't going to be there Tuesday morning. It's really tough.
Sheriff,
thank you very much, Sheriff, for taking the time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by. Good to see you.
That is just one of the many sentiments that we've heard from people around here, that Mike was very dedicated. He was just loved his job, and he loved his community and his family.
Quite an emotional day. We will certainly be covering this event and bringing you some of what took place. But a lot of words stand out. One of them, as they wrapped up the ceremony here, gentleman saying, it's time to lay down your sword. And Mike Garbo was a true hero. Godspeed, Mike Garbo. Rest in peace. We'll send it back to Priscilla in the studio.
Thank you, Sean. Lupita. A good Friday afternoon for those of you just joining us. We are remembering fallen DEA agent Michael Garbo. News 4 Tucson's Sean Mooney and Lupita Murillo, who you just heard from, they're outside Calvary Chapel right now as that ceremony concluded. As hundreds gathered inside the church to remember Mike Garbo and pay tribute to the loving husband and father and dedicated law enforcement officer, speakers talked about Special Agent Garbo's sense of commitment to his family and his job.